Early Native Americans hunted in the Hurst area thousands of years ago, but the region wasn't inhabited permanently until the Caddo Indians settled along the upper Trinity River in approximately 900 AD. The Caddos lived in villages and were primarily an agricultural people, raising crops such as beans, corn, and squash. They also supplemented their diet by hunting the abundant game in the area. The Caddos were followed by the Wichita Indians, who moved southward from Kansas into the region in the 18th century. The first Anglo-Europeans to the area were the French in the early 1700s. A Spanish expedition to the Trinity River Basin in 1778 reported something the Indians already knew, that the area was ideally suited for both farming and hunting. Anglo settlement of the area would have to wait until after the Texas Revolution in 1836. In 1841, Captain John Bird established a short-lived fort to defend settlers against Comanche and Kiowa Indian attacks. Bird's fort was located on the north bank of the Trinity, about 10 miles southeast of present-day Hurst. The fort lasted only 3 months. It wasn't until the late 1840s that the first permanent Anglo settlers moved into the Hurst area.
The first settlers in the 1840s and 50s had to depend upon the gathering of honey and hunting deer and turkey and buffalo. But of course they quickly put in crops and raised grains and vegetables.
Many of these early settlers took their grain to John Hust's mill on the south bank of the Trinity, near the present-day Precinct Line Road Bridge. This mill was the first major hub of industry in the region. It later changed hands until it was finally purchased by Robert Randall.
It was best known, of course, as Randall's Mill, and it was Bob Randall, I guess, in the late 19th century who was the first postmaster. And there was not only the grist mill there, but the post office and a few other stores, and Randall's Mill, of course, was a good deal bigger than Hurst in the late 19th century.
While the mill was a major industry center for the area, it also had an air of mystery and tragedy associated with it. Several mill workers and Randall's brother died there in work-related accidents. In addition, 2 horse thieves ran afoul of the law at the mill. Besides Hust and Randall, other important early settlers here were Hamilton Bennett and Isaac Parker, who purchased Bennett's farm and cabin in 1853, near what is today the Loop 820 and Highway 10 intersection. Isaac Parker was the uncle of Cynthia Ann Parker, who had been kidnapped by Indians near Mexia in 1836. Cynthia Ann was later found living among the Comanches and was returned to her uncle Isaac. Cynthia Ann, who was the mother of the famous Indian chief Quanah Parker, lived in the present-day Hurst area in Uncle Isaac's cabin. She soon got homesick for the Comanche way of life, but she was not allowed to return to her Indian family and was instead moved east away from the frontier, where she died heartbroken 4 years later. Today, Isaac Parker's cabin has been restored and is now located at Log Cabin Village in Fort Worth. Parker himself is buried in Weatherford and is the namesake for Parker County. Several other Parkers, including Lucy Parker and her son Isaac Duke, are buried in the Parker Family Cemetery in Hurst, near Loop 820 and Highway 10. Another wave of immigration came into the area after the Civil War. Daniel Arwine and his wife Julia came here from Indiana in 1865 and established a farm at what is now Brown Trail and Pipeline Road. Arwine also gave 6 acres for the establishment of a church, school, and cemetery. The Arwine School was also known as the Red Sulphur Springs School because of a nearby spring. A second school built later was affectionately known as the Would You Thought It School, over residents' surprise of actually having not 1, but 2 schools in the community. Arwine Cemetery can still be seen today, next to the Bel Air Shopping Center. The Arwine community was one of the most important early settlements in the pre-Hurst area. In 1870, Hurst's namesake arrived in a wagon pulled by 2 horses. William Letchworth Hurst of Tennessee was accompanied by his wife Mary Ann and their 7 children. Hurst was an entrepreneur. By the 1900s, he'd moved from farming into land speculation. He played the fiddle and was one of the most popular residents in the area. By the end of the first decade, the whole community was celebrating his birthday every year, and the Billy Hurst picnics were quite a festival. Besides the Hursts and the Arwines, other Indiana immigrants to the area included Jeff and Mary Ellen Souder, E.E. Souder, the Andersons, Browns, Sextons, and Robertsons.
In the late 1800s, about 1870, the Souders came here from Bedford, Indiana. This was a very rural community, undeveloped and everything, and it became a truck farming, as we call it, a farming community. Raised cantaloupes and tomatoes and corn and crops like that. It was a farming community. That was about the only employment there was here is farming, and maybe a little bit of dairying, a small amount of milk cows.
Georgia native Reverend Marion Isham arrived in 1876 and founded another of Hurst's early churches, Isham's Chapel, located at Precinct Line and Trammell Davis. The church building was also used as a schoolhouse. After the Civil War, many of the ex-slaves from the area plantations settled near the Trinity River bottom. This early African-American settlement became known as Mosier Valley, and today Bell Helicopter is located in the western edge of this pioneer farming community. In 1903, the area where the Hursts, Arwines, Souders, and Ishams had settled was officially known as Hurst for the first time.
The railroad came through, and the Rock Island Railroad, and they came out here to get right away. And that he had a lot of William Letchworth Hurst had a lot of property along the railroad, or where the railroad is in there. And they got the right away from him, and of course, so they built a station there and called it the Hurst Station.
It wasn't long before the post office here by the train station had to change its name to Ormel, because another town to the south had already claimed the name of Hurst. But by 1909, that town had faded, and Ormel went back to its original name of Hurst. One of the major roads into Hurst on the east during this time went roughly from what is now Pipeline Road to Bluebonnet Drive to Brown Trail and then on to Norwood. The roughest part of this road is now located in Rickle Park off the 900 block of Bluebonnet. From the 1890s to the 1920s, this road traversed some fairly rugged terrain, nicknamed by early travelers as the Devil's Backbone. During this period, about 30 to 50 families lived here. The business center of Hurst was what is now the 100 block of West Hurst Boulevard, or Highway 10.
T.J. Dickey was a family, had the first grocery store, and they had the grocery store down there by the railroad track, and back then, early days, and that was really the first grocery store in the area, Hurst area. Is T.J. Dickey family had that, and they moved that one whenever the highway, on Highway 10, where it is now, where the road was going from Fort Worth to Dallas through Mosier Valley, and that remained there until the early, I believe until the late 30s.
In the 1930s, several other businesses were established in Hurst, most notably Emma's Cafe and Grocery. Local residents, including black families from nearby Mosier Valley, were regular customers in the grocery. The cafe saw a lot of traffic from Armour and Swift truckers using the Fort Worth to Dallas Highway through Hurst. Emma Souder ran the operation with her husband and son Bill, who became the first postmaster of Hurst following World War II.
In February '49, the first post office in Hurst was established. So all we had, we put the post office in the part of our grocery store there, over in the corner of our grocery store, and had a small bank of boxes. People could rent boxes, what have you. And the population, of course, then was around maybe 1,000 people then. Well, I was helping my mother in the grocery store. I helped her operate the grocery store, and in addition, then I was a postmaster. And of course, there wasn't a lot of activity in the post office back then. Yeah, that was the center of the town, is the post office. And the later, I'm saying, I think it's early in the late 30s that Fort Worth Sand and Gravel started mining out there, and that became an employment area for it. It was major employment back then.
The Depression hampered growth in Hurst as it did across America, but that stagnation was brought to an end by World War II. Nearly a third of Hurst's men served in the conflict.
The war did, well, energize the community somewhat, and by 1945 or so, Hurst was slowly becoming a bedroom community, servicing Fort Worth. And there were maybe 200, 250 people in Hurst by the mid or late 40s.
1951 was one of the most important dates in Hurst's history. It was in that year that Bell Helicopter announced construction of a $3 million plant on Hurst Boulevard. Opened in October 1953, the facility literally transformed Hurst from a sleepy rural farming community into a thriving and vibrant city. In May 1951, Hurst was incorporated. In 1953, Joe Watson was hired as a one-man police force.
It went from a one-man operation in 1953. There was 85 people in the police department when I retired the 1st of April '85. They didn't have there were no paid employees in the city of Hurst. I was the first one. One-man operation. The crime was, well, I guess you'd say practically nil out here. We didn't have anything to speak of. I didn't find it necessary to wear a gun every day.
It wasn't long before Hurst was booming. Real estate development sprang up across from Bell Helicopter. Soon, the city's steady growth northward that was to occur over the next 4 decades was underway. Next came developments along Pipeline Road with its businesses and restaurants. Then north of Pipeline, more housing subdivisions. Soon the growth reached Bedford-Euless Road. And so it has gone ever since, with the alternating development northward of homes, then businesses, then more homes. If Bell Helicopter was responsible for the original transformation of Hurst, another development at the intersection of Loop 820 and Airport Freeway was to be the reason for the city's continued growth and remarkable quality of life. Opened in 1971, Northeast Mall boasted a retail space of 700,000 square feet. In 1978, the mall expanded to 1.2 million square feet. In its first month of operation, the mall doubled retail sales in Hurst. The original City Hall was located at Holder Drive and Highway 10. Finished in 1955, it was built of concrete blocks. The city's population at this time was 8,500. Following the city's northward growth, a new City Hall opened in 1960 at 700 Mary Drive, off Pipeline. All city services except police were located here. The population by this time had grown to 10,500. In the next 2 years, the number of businesses in Hurst doubled. In 1966, the city moved into a third new City Hall near the intersection of Highway 121 and Precinct Line. By 1970, the population had jumped to 27,000. In 1997, the city renovated and expanded this facility into a new, beautifully designed 3-story structure that houses many city departments as well as council chambers. The first city library was a simple shed built in 1957 next to the first City Hall off Holder Drive. In 1960, the library joined the other city departments at the new 700 Mary Drive location. In 1980, the library got its own separate building, a $1.3 million facility on Precinct Line Road, just north of Pipeline. Besides Bell Helicopter and Northeast Mall, another key factor in Hurst's sustained growth has been at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, opened in 1974. Many businesses and residents have located in Hurst because of its proximity to the airport. The airport's growth has in turn created more traffic through the northern part of Hurst, most notably on Airport Freeway, Highway 183-121. Hurst continues to reinvent itself, staying abreast of the times while retaining its community flavor and atmosphere. Residents appreciate the excellent city services, including those at City Hall, the library, police and fire, and the Public Works Department. Amidst all of its growth, Hurst has retained many of the qualities that have always made it a special place to live.